let's analyze the free practice 1 and 2 sessions in Las Vegas, starting with the problem Leclerc had in free practice 2. In fact, there was a red flag because of Leclerc, who stopped at the side of the track due to a transmission problem, a gearbox issue he had. Nothing serious, I want to say right away. In fact, it will be replaced and there won't be any grid penalties during the weekend. However, there was a small setback at the start of this Ferrari weekend, which is still very positive. In fact, I want to say that Ferrari, both Leclerc and Hamilton, have said that the weekend has started very well. Ferrari is responding well, and the car is easier to drive compared to, let's say, other tracks where Ferrari has started with more difficulties. The track conditions are quite difficult to read, meaning the track is slippery, the asphalt is cold, and we've seen many braking errors. We'll talk about it later. And in today's video, we'll analyze the times, look at the statements, the onboard footage, and also the technical specifications modified by the teams. We'll look at the various front wings and the rear wing. In short, there are many things to look at together. Before we start, please leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications to support the work I do in data analysis. And with that said, let's look at everything in detail because there are many very interesting things. Let's start right away, as we saw earlier, with this image showing the end of the FP2 session where Leclerc had to leave the car because of this gearbox problem. Many might say it's recurring bad luck for Charles, and that's certainly true, but I must say it's a problem that hasn't affected Leclerc's mood. In fact, as the saying goes, judging by his expression, we saw a still positive Leclerc at the end of free practice 2. In fact, I'll show you right away his reaction, if we want, to this. After free practice 2, because we saw a more positive, smiling Leclerc, a Leclerc who says, I know where we need to improve the car and we'll work on it tomorrow. We'll see where we are in free practice 3. But we've started this weekend in Las Vegas very well, and it's true because Ferrari has shown strength both in braking and acceleration. It struggled a bit perhaps in cornering, having some snap, as they say, which means a bit of rear-end grip loss in cornering. But beyond this, Ferrari has still proven to be competitive, and Las Vegas is a track that suits the characteristics of the SF25 because it's a track where you need a low downforce setup, good braking, and good stability, and Ferrari has that. It lacks a bit of rotation, the SF25, as we've said many times, but beyond that, Ferrari is on these points able to optimize the car, and Las Vegas suits Ferrari's characteristics. Here, I'll show you another image showing a somewhat disheartened Leclerc at the end of free practice 2 due to the gearbox problem, but it also shows the Ferrari's rear wing, which you see is flat, but in free practice 1, they also tried another wing. In fact, this is the wing they tried in free practice 1, the trimmed one, as they say. So let's say cut on the upper part, while this is the rear wing used in free practice 2, the one we also saw in the previous image, which is instead straight. In fact, many teams thought of using a wing with less downforce than what is actually needed in Las Vegas. Because yes, in Las Vegas, you need a low downforce wing both at the front and rear. But it's also important to have downforce when braking. So it's important to have a car that brakes well, reaches the apex correctly, and for that you need some front downforce and rear grip when accelerating. In fact, McLaren itself first went with a very low downforce setup in free practice 1 on the rear wing, and then switched to a flat wing in free practice 2 for both drivers. They tried it on Piastri in free practice 1, and in free practice 2, they tried it on Norris and Piastri, a flat wing. So this difference is also on the front wing. Again, with McLaren, we see this trimmed wing in free practice 1 to have, let's say, less aerodynamic drag and go faster on the straight, and then a straight wing with a straight flap in free practice 2 to get more downforce under braking, and therefore have a more stable front end right at the corner entry. In fact, let's do a recap now of the free practice sessions in general. I'll also show the standings, of course, from free practice 2. This is the leaderboard with Norris in front, Antonelli, Leclerc, Hülkenberg, Hadjar, Lawson, and so on with all the others. From the standings, you can already tell that it's a very varied leaderboard. We have different teams, different stables, one next to the other, and it means that all teams are at the limit, all teams are very close, there's no team that stands out from the others. To tell the truth, McLaren seems strong even here in Las Vegas. They said, be careful because Las Vegas is not a favored track for McLaren, and this is true, but McLaren has started strong. It started strong, made adjustments from free practice 1 to free practice 2. Norris didn't do badly. On the contrary, Piastri struggled more. Piastri did far fewer laps in free practice 2, he said so himself. We saw Lewis Hamilton very positive at the end of free practice 2, and that's good. Here we see approaching turn 1. A slight snap you see here in progress. This makes us understand how the track conditions are really unstable in the sense that the asphalt is cold and the track is not rubbered. So it's understandable that drivers make these mistakes. You see here this slide, which is very nice to look at, but not so effective for the lap time. This is the direction change in the central chicane of Las Vegas. We've always said Ferrari is strong in braking. In fact, compared to McLaren, one of its strengths is braking. And I think also acceleration in single input corners. And we saw this also in Baku, if you will, in the first sector where Ferrari was strong. Where does Ferrari struggle? In all those corners where more rotation is needed, so the car needs to rotate a lot, go to corners that turn back, and also in those corners where perhaps a more agile car is needed. So in the various chicanes, their Ferrari lacks a bit of precision in progress, and we've seen this at the beginning of the year. And this is a recurring theme. Unfortunately, you can't change the nature of the car, and you risk getting caught in traffic easily. In this case, Hamilton, let me show you, finds a Sauber in front in braking 2. He had to completely change direction. This is a clear impeding. This would have been punishable. In qualifying, it's a clear mistake by the Sauber race engineer. Not so much the drivers, because the drivers should be notified by the race engineer. In this case, be careful with these situations here. I'll show you, because it could happen also in qualifying, and with such close gaps between the various drivers, even a single impeding could completely ruin your qualifying, and the driver risks being eliminated either in Q1 or Q2. So be careful with these things, because they could come back also. They could come back in qualifying, so be careful. These are the various sectors, and we see that even Mercedes has the best first sector close to Hamilton, who has 15 thousandths faster than Norris, who is third. We see the second sector, which is the more technical part, where McLaren is again the best. But you see that Ferrari, actually McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes are very, very close to each other, while Red Bull is found to be more in difficulty. This is an important initial data point. I wanted to say that we've seen Red Bull in difficulty in these first free practices, especially due to the conditions, and a Red Bull that struggles to go fast when the asphalt is cold, when there are many slow corners. Red Bull doesn't do well in slow corners and can't have higher top speed through slow corners. This is a bit about the top speeds. But they don't say much because there are also slipstreams available. So for example, Hamilton here with a top speed of 359 kilometers per hour definitely had a slipstream. And here the most important graphic in my opinion is the one with the times. The ideal lap times have been done. So the ideal times of the various drivers, if you put together all the best sectors done by different drivers, and we see that Norris's is first and a McLaren shows us that it is competitive even here from Las Vegas, and it was not obvious because it is a track, as we said, unfavorable to McLaren among all those available in the calendar, and Antonelli is there. And the quite impressive thing is that Antonelli is second. Mercedes shows us to be very strong. Why were Leclerc and Hamilton satisfied? Well, because they are third and fourth, and Hamilton. Let me also show the standings is 10th if we look at the free practice 2 standings. So one might say, wow, Hamilton is very far behind. But note that when he put on the soft tires at the end, Hamilton made several errors, some his own, some caught by traffic. In fact, if we look at the ideal lap time, if you put all sectors together, he is fourth. And look at how much room Hamilton has to improve on his actual lap. So a lot going on. Hamilton is satisfied precisely because of this, and I want to make a small digression on Hamilton. Let's also look at his statements, because they are interesting. It's a much more optimistic Hamilton than we've seen in recent races. In fact, he said, I feel very good with the car. In free practice 1, I felt good, especially in the first sector, and then we also improved the other 2 sectors. A positive Hamilton, if he manages to keep up with Leclerc and stay close, 0.1 seconds away, that is his goal in my opinion. Stay within 0.1 seconds of Leclerc. Then, of course, if he can do better, that's great. But the goal is to stay close to Leclerc. Also because this weekend it seems that Red Bull is in a bit of difficulty. Then let's wait to talk, because Red Bull always makes a leap forward from Friday to Saturday thanks to simulations that manage to improve the car. However, as of today, Red Bull seems to be having a bit of difficulty. Let's see if Ferrari can take advantage of this. And Ferrari has to compete with Mercedes, because let's remember, there's the Constructors' Championship open for second place between Mercedes and Ferrari. Red Bull is also there ahead of Ferrari, but Red Bull only has Verstappen bringing in points. The uncertainty remains Tsunoda always, so there will be a battle for that second place in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari is trying to give their best for that as well. McLaren makes a big difference here. Let me quickly show you. This part of the chicane here is really fast, even on soft tires. It makes a big difference. And we'll see it with the telemetry, but an excellent McLaren in the central sector, and Norris especially very competitive. Let's take a look at the times. So the times were a bit of a problem with the telemetry because the GPS data is a bit off, but I've tried to make a general summary. Let's start with these 4 times. Leclerc, Russell, Verstappen and Norris are the best times made on medium tires in free practice 2, and I decided to take these times because they were the most reliable, since not all drivers did laps on soft tires, so these are the best on medium. We see that the best time recorded is Leclerc's among these, 1 minute and 33.7 seconds. Where does Ferrari make the difference compared to other teams? Well, definitely top speed. Ferrari is much faster compared to, for example, McLaren, which struggles a bit more. You can also see here 314 kilometers per hour top speed, 336 in the various peaks before braking. Ferrari is very strong. In braking, Ferrari also makes a big difference. In fact, it always has a higher average speed in braking compared to the competitors. So Leclerc brakes harder and gains more confidence, also thanks to a setup that is light but allows some front end grip. On exit, it manages to have good traction, so it makes a difference there as well. Where does Ferrari struggle a bit more instead? Well, Ferrari struggles a bit more in the central part where an agile and precise car is needed. Also, as I mentioned, in turn 1, you can see that the competitors lower a lot because the rotation Ferrari needs in the corner is lacking. It has a slight understeer, which obviously bothers the drivers. While in braking, for example, in the last corner, you can see that Leclerc manages to extend because he brakes harder, and in that single input corner, Ferrari goes faster. So if we want to find weak points, it's turn 1 and the central part. If we want to find strong points, it's top speed, the last corner, and decisive braking in all those corners where Ferrari makes a big difference. Here, for example, you can see Ferrari in turn 2, which is a fast right turn, struggling a bit. So be careful also in fast corners where Ferrari struggles a bit more compared to the competitors, even though there aren't many fast corners in Las Vegas. Let's move on. These are the laps on soft tires in free practice 2. Norris, Antonelli, Leclerc. These are the only drivers among the top teams who have set good times with soft tires. Hamilton also did it, but he couldn't put the lap together, so I didn't take Hamilton as a reference. I included Antonelli, but you can see that Antonelli's GPS is a bit off. Actually, in the central section, it looks like he lost signal a bit, so his time isn't reliable. I added him just for completeness, but for lap times on soft tires, use Norris and Leclerc as your references. You can see that Leclerc set a slightly slower time compared to what he did on medium tires. So here too, we should take with a grain of salt the fuel load the various drivers had on board. And you can see how McLaren makes a difference in the central sector where it gains a lot. Norris, in this case, in this chicane I mentioned before, which I showed you in the lap, goes from 0.1 behind Leclerc to 0.4, so he gains 0.3 in 2 corners. I mean, really in a very short time. On the contrary, he then manages to reduce his gap here in this braking, where he goes from 3.8, 3.8, more or less maintains the same, then extends on the straight. Leclerc manages to have a good top speed, reduces it to 2.8, and then in the last braking, Leclerc also makes a difference on Norris. In the different braking zones, Leclerc manages to go quicker, but he also loses a bit in this turn too. As I said before, more or less the references are the same with soft tires between the weak points and strengths of Ferrari and McLaren. Leclerc-Hamilton, on the other hand, we see 2 slightly different configurations. We saw a slightly lighter Hamilton, while Leclerc is a bit heavier compared to Hamilton, and this is also evident from the top speeds. Hamilton manages to reach higher top speeds compared to Leclerc. between the two, in my opinion, if they match the setup, we could see two very similar drivers in terms of performance. So let's wait for tomorrow, and I'm optimistic because I saw a very confident, happy, and optimistic Hamilton. We might see a good Hamilton in this single-seater. It's a bit lighter, so watch out for the race pace, but in my opinion, he could do well. This is a bit of a time analysis. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if you want to delve deeper into some topics. I'll obviously respond. Pay attention to the graining issue. It has been a bit overrated this year, meaning there is less graining than the teams expected. However, McLaren seems to be the team that suffers the most from graining, and it's a bit of a negative aspect of their single-seater. This year, we haven't seen many races with marked graining, but that's because the Pirelli carcass has significantly improved compared to last year. In fact, we've said the tires are the same, but the tire carcass is different and much more robust, and that's why we see less graining. But beware, the graining issue could return here in Las Vegas, as it's a slippery track with little grip and cold asphalt. In fact, graining occurs when the track is cold, so be cautious about this, as it could affect the race pace, especially. In my opinion, as of today, we see an excellent McLaren, definitely in the fight for pole position. Ferrari is also, in my opinion, up there, and we might also find them fighting for a top 3, a top 5. And obviously, watch out for Mercedes as well. I see Red Bull a bit more in difficulty today, but maybe they can recover with Verstappen, who always does that. Usually on Fridays, they start a bit behind and then recover, so never underestimate Red Bull. But all the teams are very close, so a good qualifying will make the difference. Whoever starts ahead is obviously advantaged. There are long straights, so there are overtaking opportunities. But it's also true that when the gaps are so minimal and there are long straights with DRS, various DRS trains are formed, as also happened in Baku, and therefore it's difficult to overtake, despite there being many potential overtaking points. And I hope you've understood me on this, and tell me your thoughts in the comments. As always, I obviously remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. That's all from Rasta here. See you in the next video.